Welcome to the Burnsville Parks and Natural Resources Commission meeting for November 21st, 2016. Our first item of business is to approve the agenda. Are there any items that commissioners would like to add to the agenda this evening?
Nope.
Okay, seeing none, is there a motion to approve?
Second?
Do we have a motion and a second?
Motion.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
And it is so moved. The second item is for citizen comment. Are there any citizens that would like to address the commission this evening? Seeing none, we will move on to the third item of business this evening, which is to approve the minutes for the previous meeting, July 18. Commissioners, is there anything you would like to add or amend on the minutes for the previous meeting?
Nope.
Okay, staff?
Nothing from staff.
Okay, do I have a motion for approval?
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
And I as well. It is so moved. That brings us to the fourth item of this evening, which is to get some information on a conditional use permit and plat for a tower in North River Hills Park. Presenting, we have Chris Slania.
Thank you. Excuse me. Madam Chair, Commissioners, I'm Chris Slania. I'm with the city. I'm the technical coordinator for this project, the project manager. I've been with the city over 11 years. I don't know that I've spoken in front of this group before. I've been a regular attendee to the Planning Commission and Council before, but I don't know that I've visited this commission. So I'm going to take just a minute and go over this project. As outlined in the background, it is a conditional use permit request. There is a city policy adopted by the city council years back that requires any communication tower in any of our parks in the city to go through this body as well as the Planning Commission and City Council. So this is one of the steps early on to get this project moving forward. Most of the towers and the communication poles that this group would see would be from private wireless carriers, Sprint, Verizon, etc. This is unique as this pole would be owned and operated by the city. We are constructing it. It would not be for lease to other telecom carriers, other wireless carriers, and I'll get to some of those details in a second. As indicated in the background, the tower will be 90 feet tall. That is the structure itself. A 9-foot antenna would extend above that for a total of 99 feet. That is, I don't want to necessarily say the minimum, but that's the applied height that we're looking for now to receive the coverage, the minimum coverage we need in the north and the northeast corners of Burnsville. There is a second tower existing in the park, and I'll get to some of these images in a second. We did pursue that tower initially, both cost effectiveness and aesthetics in the park, but we have adjusted our plans and going with the freestanding pole. So this is North River Hills Park. This image on the left, looking north, here's the main parking lot, the shelter, the pickleball and tennis courts are right in this area. The existing T-Mobile tower is right here. That's 50 feet tall. There, the proposed area for the city's tower would be where the red dot is. Here's another angle to the top or straight above would be west. Parking lot, shelter. You can see this light standard right there would be removed with the design, and that would be the location for the proposed tower. There are 3 different light fixtures on that existing standard. Those would then be placed on the new tower as a replacement, so the athletic facility has the proper lighting, but the same location would be used. And finally, another image. This would be the tower to be removed. Here are the light fixtures. Across the tennis courts you'll see the T-Mobile tower. Indicated in the background, there is a tree right in this area. This coniferous tree would need to be removed just due to its proximity to the location of the tower and getting the equipment into the area. We do not expect any other disturbance to the park. No significant grading or tree removal would be part of the project. And here is an image, obviously superimposed. It does have the tree in there. The light standards would be placed back in it. A very basic pole, as I indicated. We are not designing this for future leasing to cell carriers. We've got a tenant across the courts. T-Mobile is there. We do gather rent from that pole. Because of a number of reasons, because of timing, we're not designing this in a manner that it will take on additional tenants in the future. Second, the aesthetics of the structure, the more equipment we would put on it or design it to accommodate it in the future, the wider it gets, the thicker it gets at the base. That's where we could get into additional grading, tree removal, things like that. We want this to be as a minimal impact to the area as we can. So it would, the only antenna on it would be a very thin, they call them whip antennas, very thin, about 9 feet tall. It's not the large boxes, rectangle boxes and things like that you see on some of the other water towers, or even what's on the adjacent pole. It would be very thin, similar to what you see extending off the top of that. Now the question then becomes, why are we doing this? What's the purpose of this tower? That gets to a greater policy decision the city and the city council have in place. Over the next couple years, the city is redoing their water meter infrastructure citywide. And currently water meters, both commercial and residential, are read, or the data is gathered by vehicles driving around the city and picking up a wireless communication. That is time consuming, it's costly, it does involve a lot of manpower. As these water meters are replaced, they will have transmit via radio frequency to collector sites. Proposer would be 4 collector sites throughout the city, and data from your home or your business or whatever you may have would be transmitted to that collector site, and then through our fiber optic cable it would be downloaded to the city's finance system and water utility billing and create almost instantaneous reads and not only streamline collection but also streamline the accuracy of the data, the timeliness of the data, efficiencies in manpower and vehicles needed to drive around the city. So it does provide a number of benefits. Also long-term, we're realizing some of the meters that are in place are not necessarily accurate. They're aging, and as time goes on, the accuracy of that data is reduced. So not only new meters, but more efficient meters. We also understand this will help us collect data on odd events such as water main breaks, snowbirds that are out of the state for the winter. If a water main breaks or a pipe bursts or something like that, we'll have that information much more readily than we do now, where it could be 30, 45 days or who knows how long before we notice a substantial increase in water usage. This could be hours or days instead of weeks, and hopefully saving everybody time and money to do that. The three other locations would be the three water towers we have in Burnsville: Buck Hill, Colonial Hill, and Heather Hills. Those, the whip antennas, the collection antennas for those sites are actually going up as we speak. And because of the topography of Burnsville, we're really lacking coverage in the north area. Our farthest northern water tower is Heather Hills, not too far from City Hall, so there's a lot of Burnsville to the north that isn't covered. And unfortunately, the T-Mobile tower that is in that park now is only 50 feet tall. We need essentially another 49 feet, another 50 feet to get that coverage to the north and the northeast corners of Burnsville. The Cedar Bridge area and all the commercial properties north of there. That is the necessity for the tower. As I touched on, its primary focus would be that. From a staff standpoint, we would envision utilizing this for free public Wi-Fi in the park. With that pole or antenna there, we can increase the height and provide some public Wi-Fi. There's also been security concerns in that park, and this would be an opportunity to provide some security cameras in that area as well. Again, those are added benefits, not really driving the project, but something we envision moving forward. I apologize, Commissioners. Let me just skim through my notes. I did want to mention there was a notice for a neighborhood meeting back in October 11th. We sent out invitations to the surrounding property owners. No one attended that meeting. However, the neighbors will also get notice for the upcoming Planning Commission meeting. Should they have concerns or questions, we can visit them at that time as well. With that, Madam Chair, Commissioners, I'll take any questions you might have.
Yes, anything from commissioners, questions or comments?
I have
Yes, Commissioner, please.
So you said that we are adding that. Why don't we enhance the one that we already have and make it taller? Is there a reason?
There is a very good question, Commissioner. That scenario is set up where we are doing a land lease to T-Mobile. We do not own or operate that tower. And we discussed that, and it would be months, if not longer, of legal to get through that process.
Anything else?
So the cameras you talked about, because we have talked about it a year ago, about putting some camera. Will that also be installed when the tower is going up, or these are the future benefits that we may get, but not right now?
To be determined.
Okay, so
It would be designed in a way they could go up at any time, but that's a broader discussion of how many and where and et cetera.
okay, so the extent of this project only is the tower?
Correct.
And used for collecting water meter?
Correct. If
And
I may touch on that, Commissioners, the light standards will go up immediately, so that illuminating the tennis courts will be part of this, but those additional technology items will be further down the road.
Okay.
I had a question about, to follow up on the question about the cameras. They would be going up for security reasons. I'm imagining the tennis courts, they could easily view, but the parking lot is probably the area of bigger concern for security reasons. Given the height of 90 feet, and I can't tell from the photograph here, but can it see the majority of the parking lot from its vantage?
Most likely not. Not a majority of it. There will be portions of the parking lot that it could see, specifically, if I can jump to this image, the back of the shelter and this area, there is significant tree cover. to that area. This is obviously something the commission will discuss at a future date. As part of the project, once some of that infrastructure is in, additional cameras can be added much more easily than the way it is now with no fiber optic in the area. Excuse me, a lot of that infrastructure will be secondary benefits to the tower, to having the tower there.
Okay. Commissioners, additional comments and questions? Yes, please, Commissioner Brammer.
How long will it take to get the pole like in place? Like, will the park have to be shut down for that, or how long?
Wonderful question. Something I learned going through this process, it'll be very, very quick. It will be a couple weeks with actual construction being a day or two. The tower or the pole will come in prefabricated in a couple pieces. Initial work on the footings will be done ahead of time. That should be minimal disturbance, and then once a crane or that heavy equipment will be in place, it will go up very quickly.
Thank you.
Commissioners, anything else?
Well,
Yes, Merv,
and
please.
when are we planning to do this?
We're looking at very early spring. Spring
17?
of 2017, as early as weather allows us to move forward, which is essentially why we're going through the process now, so that we can have things in place when Mother Nature allows us to get in there.
I have a question about Mother Nature. Would it be possible to put something like an osprey nest on the tower? I mean, you shouldn't have to answer
Yeah.
that right now, but if
It-
it could be
it's-
possible, it could be looked at.
It could be looked at from a structural standpoint. It would not be a problem. That'd be minimal weight. What I don't know is some of the logistics of that, but it's something staff can pursue.
Sure, and I can't say I know exactly what height they're ideal for and proximity to water, but I just thought
Certainly.
towers and osprey nests have been paired up really well in other cities.
That's something we can pursue.
Sure, thank you. And then my other observation about the removal of the tree is just to request that replacement tree would be species native to Minnesota, preferably in the oak family.
That is absolutely acceptable. Staff will be working with Parks and Natural Resource staff to get that done once the poll's in, so we can take care of that.
Excellent. Other comments or questions from commissioners? Okay, seeing none, do we have a motion to approve? We are looking for a recommendation to move forward with this project.
Motion to approve.
Okay, I have a motion and I have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye as well, and it is so moved.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Chris Lamia, for your time and your presentation.
Thank you.
That brings us to the fifth item of business for the evening, which is recycling opportunities in Burnsville parks. And we have Sue Bast presenting.
Good evening, Madam Chair, Commissioners. I'm Sue Bast, Environmental Specialist for City of Burnsville. I usually come and talk to you about sustainability. Tonight, I'll be talking to you a little bit about park recycling. Give you a little bit of background about recycling in City of Burnsville parks. In 2012, we started collecting recycling in the Nicollet Commons Park. And then in 2014, we decided to try a pilot project at Cliff Fen and at Neal Park Building. And so we put recycling containers out there and, would look at the containers and see if people were recycling. and try and figure out, what would the labor be and what would the costs be for a program like that. We also researched options such as, I work with Egan and Apple Valley also as part of recycling program. And we wanted to find out if maybe we could combine all three cities and collect park recycling. But that did not, the other cities were not interested in that. So that didn't move forward. We looked at dumpsters in the parks to make it easier to recycle, but that would need to include enclosures, and that was pretty expensive and would take up valuable space. That didn't seem appropriate for our parks. We also looked at whether or not city personnel, if we had enough personnel to do park recycling. And it would take more personnel than we had. So we met with park staff, the recycling department and park staff got together and met and just discussed how we could move forward. And we did look at a private hauler option, very expensive, and it would also, we would need to have roller carts and bring those carts to the curb, which would involve personnel, and it would also be expensive. So that didn't work very well. And we did report that last year to the PNRC. Why are we trying so hard to get recycling in the parks? Well, just the same reasons that we try and recycle at home. It diverts the waste from the landfill. It saves our resources. And we want to, there's 1.5 billion plastic bottles sold in Minnesota every year. A lot of them are consumed in our parks, particularly in the athletic complexes. So we want to create a convenient recycling opportunity in the parks. And it's also a way to engage the residents in some very positive behaviors. The recycling rate, the goal is 75% by 2030, and so that would help us reach that goal. But the challenges, I do get quite a few calls asking why can't we just set out recycling containers? And we could, but then they would look like that if we didn't have someone to pick it up and a truck to bring them back, bring the material back, and put it in a dumpster so that it would be taken care of. And there's also variation in waste. It's for recycling, we need a very clean stream of material, and sometimes that's hard to educate people to put the right thing in the right barrel. And visitors are from very different areas. I know when my daughter was in sports, we went all over Dakota County. So we get visitors from all different cities, all different communities. And it is seasonal, so we bring in a lot of the containers and then have to bring them back out again in the spring. And there is a cost to everything that we do. But also opportunity. We could divert probably 60 to 80% of the waste in the parks, divert it out of the landfill. And we also could create a very consistent message throughout Dakota County to the residents. Not only do you recycle in your home, excuse me, but you can recycle on the go too. And you can go from community to community and do that. And the community parks in Burnsville contain most of the trash and recycling. If you think of the athletic complexes, that's where a lot of the liquids are consumed, whether it's sports drinks or water or whatever. We did look at comparable market cities: Apple Valley, Brooklyn Park, Coon Rapids, Egan, Edina, Lakeville, Minnetonka, Plymouth, and St. Louis Park. And we did ask them questions about park recycling and how they do that, how they do run their program. Minnetonka was the only community that didn't have a park recycling program, and there were 2 cities that had it in all of their parks, but only 2. Existing staff is used to perform work in all but 2 of the cities, but many of the cities are taking a look as they go forward at the different budget items that are required. And I just wanted to have you take a look there. Most of the Dakota County area does have recycling in their parks. And if you take a look, I'm going to go to the best management practices. If you just quickly take a look, there's some things that, even though the containers are very different, you'll notice colors. Blue is always for recycling. There's always, we try to have signage, and we try to have constricted openings. So a few of the best management practices: always pair recycling with trash. And the reason for that is that if whatever is closest and whatever is easiest, that's where everything goes. So if you have a trash container here and the recycling containers over there, everything goes into the trash. Or if you have a recycling container and the trash is over there, trash and recycling and everything is going to go into the recycling container. Color code receptacles, use restrictive lid openings, make it convenient, and signage. Use graphics and put the message anywhere you can: top, sides, front. It's best to cover the top, make it fire resistant, and be able to be serviced from the top, because many of the trucks, either you pull out the bag from the top or you service it with a lift. Weather resistant and aesthetically appropriate. Why is all that important? I think sometimes people think, well, just bring whatever you get and bring it to it's called a MRF. It's a materials recovery facility. That's a recycling facility. Just bring it there and they'll sort it out. But those MRFs can only take in a very small percentage of garbage. If they take, they're allowed what it's called residuals. They're allowed a small percentage of whatever they bring in that can go to be trash. If they go over that, then they're no longer a recycling facility. So they will reject, if there's a load of recycling that's coming in and it looks like it's mostly trash or a lot of trash, they'll reject that. So we try to keep the recycling containers as little contamination in there as possible. And if we want to collect as much recycling as we can, then we want to restrict the opening on the trash too. So people walk up, and this has all been studied, there's all kinds of studies on this. A lot of it at the Disney World. People walk up and they have their stuff. Some will go in the trash and some will go in the recycling container if they have restricted lids. So it makes it easy for visitors to understand. When I showed you the picture of Dakota County, I think most people, well, we know that because we've taken a look, we've done waste sorts. They understand blue, black, and signage, graphics. And they do a very good job of putting recycling in the recycling containers. But always things change, and we can always evaluate and adjust and do as much education as we possibly can. And then Jeff is going to talk about the maintenance.
Good evening, Madam Chair, Commissioners. Jeff Raddick, Assistant Public Works Director. I got the second half of this presentation. I think we realize we can talk about this all we want, especially at a management level and the advisory level, but somebody has to do the work. And we see parks maintenance as doing this work, associated with recycling in the parks. Parks maintenance also sees this as both environmental stewardship, but also in a business sense, we see it as a customer requested service. I think, between talking with personnel that answer parks inquiries, recycling in the parks is quite often the third level of inquiry that we get. Obviously, number one is mowing. Number two is just cleanliness and garbage within the parks. Quite often, following that discussion is a discussion about recycling in the parks, as staff answers those calls or emails. Currently, all the marketable recyclings are scavenged. This proposal doesn't really address that. We will leave that as currently exists. If you get to the trash before we do, you can scavenge for aluminum, and other marketable materials in there. We don't see we're gonna change that and make this, by any means, a business service. This is strictly a community service. And we see it as similar to our parks garbage program as can be. Just to give you a sense of scale, the parks garbage program is 60 to 70 man-hours of work a week. It is Monday through Friday, 40 hours a week, one person. And then Saturday and Sunday, garbage is collected around the reservation system and the tournament system that exists within the park system. So we are collecting garbage 7 days a week. We see recycling, we'd be doing the same thing to collect the recycling. If we left one off or the other off, we'd have, especially with the tournaments, we'd have dissatisfied tournament organizers. As Sue said, we do pick up recycling in Nicollet Commons Park. Nicollet Commons Park is the only park in the system that we have a dedicated maintenance person that's there full-time. And that they can easily prioritize recycling with the workload that's in the park and get it done. Some park systems they can do their whole system that way. They can have dedicated people around the parks, and they can prioritize within the park. It doesn't work in Burnsville very well. We are at 76 parks, so we organize our people around the tasks that need to be done, not the specific parks. So it works really well in cities when you have the full-time person there and they can prioritize. If we had to prioritize recycling in 76 parks, one of our 14 full-time employees would spend 2 days driving around just to prioritize the work for the week. So we lose a lot of work. We also collect, as Sue said, recycling in Neal Park building. That's on a reservation basis. I guess the inquiry there, I'd say recycling works well on a reservation basis, but there's limiting returns. 20 people are using the shelter or the building, and they consume a dozen beverages. Several dozen beverages can be consumed by one team on a tournament site. So the building reservation has we're going to work through that. I'm not sure if it has a great amount of recycling coming from it. And Cliff Fenton, we have done other trial projects, recycling projects in other parks, and basically what we've learned from those is you need a dedicated program basically for that prioritization. And that's basically what our proposal is from here. So what do we need to do to get a dedicated program? We need to prioritize routes. First thing we need to do is, as Sue said, we brought back the proposal for the 22 community parks. As we see it, that's where the majority of the recycling actually exists within the park system. So we are prioritizing routes based around those 22 community parks. Additional staff people, we got one additional seasonal staff person. Like I said, Seasonal staff person is 40 hours a week. We expect this to be a 7-hour-a-week project, so how do we get there? Well, obviously, we expect our garbage program, the amount of waste within our garbage program to be going down. So there's gonna be some efficiencies gained there in the garbage program that can help supplement, so we can get to 7 days a week collection with recycling as well. And when we get to discuss fleet, basically, dedicated programs get dedicated vehicles within the fleet, and we need that, and I'll discuss that a little bit more. If you're wondering if you can't remember what the 22 community parks are, I listed them there. As Sue said, the recreational based or more programmed recreation parks, athletic facilities have the most recycling. You're talking that 80% recycling rate in those parks, and we see those as Al Magnet, Lac Lavon, Neal, and Sioux Fisher. Those just from general looking in the garbage and things, those are the 4 that really stick out to have the most recycling, and those would be emptied on a daily basis. So when you talk a proposal for Public Works, it's quite often tied to a budget. And when I talk budget, we talk 2 components: a capital component and an operating component. Capital is where we buy the assets that have a fixed life. Operating is where we maintain or provide the service going forward. So on this, we have a capital purchase of the vehicle. As I said, I oversee fleet as well. So dedicated programs get dedicated vehicles. If we don't go with a dedicated program, we get leftover hand-me-down vehicles. Quite often those hand-me-down vehicles don't fit the task that's within the park system. You can't haul garbage in a police cruiser as a hand-me-down. So one of the largest purchaser capital is the truck itself at $42,000. And then you got to program that truck to be replaced. Currently, trucks of that category are replaced at 10 years. So once you work that out, $4,200 annually for the replacement of capital. And then operating, we have the 1 additional seasonal employee. Wages and benefits for those is around $14,000 for 6 months. As we said, we see recycling probably as a seasonal service. There are some things that can happen outside of the season where we have to explore those a little bit more as we go. But definitely around ice skating rinks and things like that, there is a little bit of recycling opportunity within a winter season. And operating expenses, you gotta pay to fuel the truck and maintenance on the truck and other things along those. We basically use 10% of the purchase cost as operating expenses for a vehicle. In the meantime, as I said, this is gonna be a 2018 budget request from staff to council. So this is informational purposes. So while you're waiting for that to happen, some things that you maybe didn't notice, and sorry, some of these pictures are not the best quality. They were used for other purposes. But in the top left there, you see we used to call them carnival recycling cans. They're the green and the blue ones. We have, in the past year, as they come back to the maintenance center for sanding and painting or to be replaced, they are getting color-coded black. So we work on mess management practices there. And the parks that do offer it, we are starting to pair garbage and recycling together. So as you wait for this whole thing to happen, we are doing things behind the scene that you maybe haven't seen, that we are getting prepared for it. We see it as, it's requested enough that it's going to happen sooner or later. Other than that, that's the end. Sue and I will stand for questions that you may have. Like I said, this is gonna be a budget request from staff to council. I guess your questions and comments will be used into the proposal for that going forward.
Thank you for the presentation. Commissioners, do we have questions and comments? Yes, Commissioner Roof?
So question for you, when you talk about seasonal, you're buying a truck.
Yep.
Don't you need a driver or that is two?
No, the one seasonal is the driver for that truck.
Okay.
The other seasonal will come out of existing seasonals.
Okay,
Quite often, we talked about that, we expect our volume of garbage to go down, so that person will have availability to drive recycling truck.
are you thinking that what is the percent that's the projected that's going to go down?
I
Just a
probably
projection.
defer to Sue, what we expect. I mean, there is the opportunity for 60 to 80% recycling. I think realistically, beginning, I don't know if that's true.
So you have you have what's in the garbage right now, so nothing changes, it's just in a different container. And what we've seen in other parks, like in Egan, Northview Park, places like that, in the athletic complexes, there is about 60 to 80% of the trash goes into the recycling because it's just such a heavy use of bottles and cans. In other parks, like Cliff Fen, or some more different community types of parks, where there's a lot of picnics and things like that, then that diversion rate goes down, the recycling rate goes down. There isn't quite as much, there's more trash than recycling. So it depends upon the park and the usages.
Okay.
Thank you for the
Thank you.
question. Other questions, comments from commissioners? Yes, Commissioner Ellery.
First off, Sue and Jeff, thank you for the presentation. This is something I know the entire commission is excited about, and this is great information. I was curious about the black barrels, and I know, I've noticed them, the painting, but would there, if you were rolling out the recycling in 2018, would there be some additional labeling on those black barrels, or are those black barrels going away to the fancier trash container?
I'd say, I guess the level of aesthetics depends on the park, what that park gets. Obviously, Nicollet Commons Park is getting the very expensive, highly aesthetic barrels that are in the up to $1,200 a piece range. Some other community parks will be getting black barrel, blue barrel, both of them labeled, definitely with the restrictive opening on the recycling. So,
The only, Commissioner, the only thing I can say about the labeling is we can get the labels free from Dakota County, park labels free. So that benefits us quite a bit, so we don't have to pay for those.
Thank you.
Thank you for your comment, for your question. Additional comments and questions? I'd also like to thank you very much. This is something that's one of the big issues for me is not seeing the recycling out in the parks. When we're in elementary school, we're taught recycling is like one of the very basic things you can do to save the planet and save your community, help your community, and then we grow up to be adults and aren't bothered so much that they aren't there. But now I'm very encouraged to hear that you have been getting requests for from the community members, from other citizens about the barrels. So that's very encouraging. And one of the parks that I really noticed a need for them, and I didn't see it on your prioritized park list, was the skate park just out here. And we visited that as on a park tour, was it in September, and I think there were 6 bins out there. They were full of, they're trash bins, but it was but it was like upwards of 90% or more recycling materials in there.
we count the skate park, Bicentennial Garden, we count that all as Civic
Okay.
Center Park,
Okay,
Civic Center Park Complex. So it's in the, it currently does have one recycling at least.
We just put in 2 recycling containers and 2 trash containers, because absolutely, you're absolutely correct. A lot of containers from that area, so,
Thirsty kids out there.
yeah,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, but thank you again for putting together the presentation and just moving forward with meeting the citizens' needs for recycling.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Yes, please.
Are there, so I know you're taking this for budget approval. Are there any Plan Bs for, let's say we don't get a truck or you don't get a personnel?
I guess we're putting most of our focus right now on the what would be a 2018 budget request. If that doesn't happen, we'll have to regroup and
Okay.
see what can be done on a smaller scale. We don't really have a problem in like a normal year. We can find people to do recycling. The problem we have is like the year we currently had, where we're mowing into mid-November and our seasonals leave us in August. So we have a very large amount of work to get done between that August and November timeframe, and that's when a program would struggle.
Thank you.
Okay, any final observations?
I just have more of a procedural question. Will this come back up to our commission for a vote?
That's probably a Garrett question. It'll at least come up as informational purposes. I don't know. I don't know the route it's going to take at the council level, to tell you the truth. If they want to talk about it at a work session or what they have, we have currently put out through the various directors and things that we'd like to talk about it with council. So.
Okay, thank you once again, Sue and Jeff, for your time and your presentations.
Thank you.
Concluding that informational presentation, that brings us to the next item of business, which is miscellaneous.
Commissioners, it's been a while since we last met here in the chambers, and since that time, we've had a number of updates. And so for this meeting, I've included some more extensive information in your background packet under the miscellaneous item, including information on our Parks Master Plan, on the Minnesota River Greenway, Black Dog Trail opening, and the Loch Levon Ball Field Complex Phase 3 project where they're working at the restrooms and concession building down there. And so I'd encourage you to take a few minutes to take a look at that information that's in your packet. But I did want to point out to you that this Wednesday is the annual winter lighting ceremony. It's scheduled for 5:30 p.m. at Nicollet Commons Park, and we encourage everyone to attend. And then we did get one late request for some additional information on the Keller Lake project that's happening down at Crystal Lake Beach area, or that park. And the question was just simply an update on what's going on with the excavation work and the contaminants that are there, the cost that may impact other projects in the future and moving forward. And the answers that I have for you, commissioners, are that a contract was awarded to a contamination removal specialist called VCI, and work is currently underway to clear the site. Weather permitting, they expect to complete the work by the end of next week and having the contaminants out. And then staff is working with our original project contractor to determine how that project will move forward once the cleanup is complete, and how we will, how that impacts the timeline and things like that of completing the work down there. So that is the information that I have for you on that particular project. The last thing that I have, commissioners, sitting in the audience tonight is our new Parks, Recreation, and Facilities Director, Garrett Beck. And just wanted to introduce him to all of you. And I know you've seen him before presenting additional information on facility projects and things like that, but Garrett will be with us from time to time presenting information, or part of our regular discussions. So welcome to Garrett.
Yes, welcome, Garrett.
And that is all that I have.
Thank you. That was a few more items than we normally have for miscellaneous. And I see also that the next meeting was December 5th
That is correct.
on there. Thank you, and that brings us to the end of our formal meeting then, our formal agenda. Do we have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Motion.
Second.
And a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye as well, and it is so moved. Thanks for joining us for the, and watching the Burnsville Parks and Natural Resources meeting.